I find it really quite interesting when someone's, oh yeah, we're doing our voice of customer exercise and we've looked through the churn analysis. And I'm like, bro, if you're looking at churn analysis, it's too late. They're not a customer anymore.
Welcome to Manage Chaos Podcast. We often talk about building processes, but what really drives those processes? Customer needs. You don't have a business if you don't have a customer. Today, we are kicking off a very special 4-part arc focused entirely on customer intelligence. How to listen, how to structure feedback, and how to use it to actually manage your growth. I am so thrilled to welcome our guest in residence, Glenn Perera from Perera Insights. Glenn is an expert on turning messy, raw customer data into very clear and actionable strategy. And today we are going to start with the very foundation, Voice of Customer, or VOC. Glenn, I am super excited to welcome you to Manage Chaos. We have known each other, I don't even know how long now, but we met in a former life, past life, Glenn? I don't know, how do we want to say that? And Glenn and I love to have conversations about all things customer. So you're basically joining our little secret tribe on this episode.
Thanks for the invite. And what an intro.
I always like to make sure people feel like, wait, that's me. So let's get started with the basics, Glenn. What exactly is Voice of Customer? Why does collecting it feel chaotic? And what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you break it down to like its core components as to what it is, you could say that it's like the methodology and the system that collects and analyzes customer feedback. And I'm framing it within a B2B world as well, because consumers are a whole other kettle of fish. But when you think about it from a point of view of like, how do you systematically collect and analyze the customer feedback that you get? And that could be things like direct feedback from the likes of surveys and interviews, but it could also be indirect data like social listening. It could be social media, it could be purchase history. There's all these things you can use to be able to kind of direct yourself in terms of what to think and why. But you've really just open up the lid on the fact that it's really chaotic. When you think about G2 reviews, you think about what's happening in terms of your sales process and your retention cycles and any churn issues. You could be taking a feature request that came in via an email. You could be taking feedback from someone who works in account management and they say, listen, this client's really, really pissed off at me at the moment. And so you take all these data points and the reality becomes that it's really hard to, how do you gauge apples for apples? Mm-hmm. And I'll say something about, these really formal ways of collecting customer feedback, the likes of CSAT and NPS. Those are very, very useful bits of data. But the amount of companies I've worked at where they will use those data points and they'll use them intelligently, without being too harsh or critical to companies I've worked in the past. But there is an element of gaming the system. When you think about it, you take those numbers and you use them how you want to, and quite frankly, I think there's a lot of instances where a client will be sent a 30-question survey, and instead of really really giving thoughtful, insightful information, often it becomes an exercise in getting through the survey.
Yeah.
So I again there are all these practices, and I think you've got to take what you've got to take what works best for you. Obviously, you need to benchmark a little bit as well. But I can tell you now that the number of companies I've worked with in the past couple of years, there are so many different ways to make use of the information, but also to source information that really benefits your road mapping, your customer experience, and the way you want to market. So that's a long-winded answer because it is a rather big topic.
It is a big topic. I think one of the things that you and I have both noticed is that sometimes the person getting that survey is not the person who's actually using your product. It might be the billing contact or the person you negotiated the contract with, but not the actual end user who's clicking on buttons and potentially actually using your product. So the voice of that buyer instead of customer might not actually be that valid. And so, honing in on who you're actually asking for information from is super important.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's you run into this territory of within that voice of customer world or that customer insights world, you obviously have client advisory boards or customer advisory boards, if you want to call them that. But then you also have that level up of client executive boards where how much information are you going to get from the CEO about the day-to-day running of the business? I mean, great. awesome. I mean, for me, that's a bit more of a press tour. That's, doing a bit of heart to heart, understanding what the way that things are moving at a very, high level. But, when you want to know, is this product serving the need? I'm not saying you need, the person who's, hands on keyboards every day, but there's levels to the game. And
There
I think,
is
having
levels.
someone, yeah.
There is levels to the
It's
game. We are going to dive into customer advisory boards on another episode, and I'm super excited about that, which is why
a
this
little teaser there for
new
you.
format is so fun.
Sure.
But one of the things we love to do here on Managed Chaos is actually give sort of some actionable steps that our listeners can take. So
Yeah.
if someone is listening and they're thinking, yes, I need a voice of customer program project, what is the simplest way or maybe an effective framework that
Yeah.
they could use to kind of start collecting really quality voice of customer data without having to invest in a new software?
I mean, I love that question. And also, I'm thinking back to the way you framed it in the beginning. Like how can you make use of something that's going to be valuable for the word go, but also not thinking about adding way too much weight to things. And so the thing that I'm really bullish on when it comes to doing voice of customers, I like when I walk into a company on a project, I ask them, like, show me everything you have. Like, give me everything. Could it be stuff that's in an email? Could it be survey data? Could it be NPS stuff? Could it be complaints in an email? Could it be
Always complaints in an email,
yeah.
for sure, 100%.
Yeah, give me all of that. Some of my favorite is when someone says, "Oh, we've got all these free-form texts entries that we've got in Salesforce. Do you want to pull those out?" And literally, someone says they churn because they hate us. I mean, great. Okay, so we have an idea of some kind of signal, but
So that's actually a great point, Glenn. So sometimes the voice of the customer might actually be them just saying, "We don't want to be a customer anymore."
yeah,
They might not tell you why, but they just are no longer a customer, and you have to dig into why that happened.
yeah. I find there's. I find it really quite interesting when someone's, "Oh yeah, we're doing our voice of customer exercise and we've looked through the churn analysis," and I'm like, "Bro, if you're looking at churn analysis, it's too late. They're not a customer anymore." But go back to your question about the framework. I think the first thing is look. I want to look at everything that you have so far, and from there, sit on it for a moment. And to begin with, let's look at company mission, vision, goals. And I'm thinking about that point you made in the intro about having, if you have no customers, you have like what are you building, what are you doing, and why? Because really the voice of customer exercise for me is to determine what you do and why, and what you don't do and why not, and how do you back up that decision. And so, looking at company mission, vision, goals, looking at if you're running OKRs, if you're running initiatives, which way you're doing your business planning. Look at all those, and then be able to, obviously look at maybe roadmap initiatives as well. So what does your roadmap look like for the next 6 to 12 months? And thematically, but also, specifically as well. And then try and overlap all the customer insight you have so far and link it to those things. Can you link every bit of customer feedback and insight into mission, vision, values, objectives, planned key results, initiatives, and also roadmap themes? And if things don't overlap enough between those, you can kind of organically say, "Hey, listen, well, this doesn't speak to mission, vision X, and doesn't speak to company goal of Y. It doesn't help us, drive retention or new business. Like, why would we do it?" And so from there, you can start, collecting a view and also putting things into boxes. And once you have that, you can start saying, "Well, actually, you know what? We want to release this new product by the end of June, and it has to be able to tick these boxes." And you go, "Well, cool. What is this actually going to do?" And all of a sudden, you might be looking at some of your customer feedback, saying, "Well, actually, none of our customers want this." That's some of the realization I get.
That's the founder dilemma sometimes, right? You think you know your customer better than they know themselves, and then they blatantly tell you, "No, I won't pay for this," but you still have that desire to put it out.
Yeah, and I think there's a balancing act between being vision led, but also being vision led and product led. But there always comes a time where your customers know your product and the problem better than you. And so how do you take that information and use it? And then obviously, you leapfrog together. But it's one of those really, it's very entertaining to watch a company go, "Well, we know exactly what our customers want." And I'll say, "Great. Well, let me ask you, who are your top 10 customers? What do they want? What do they want and why?" And I'll never get a clear answer.
Right.
And nor should I really. Like it shouldn't be the exact same mold, but like to have, you sit in a room with 10 of the top people of the company, or you ask them, "Cool, top 10 customers, what do they want and why?" whatever, it could be 5, could be 20, whatever the number is. And I guarantee you'll get, you know, 5 to 7 different flavors. You know, like they're singing the same song, but they're in different keys.
So when you've seen this successful before, who in the organization champions it, or who sort of is the quarterback of this voice of customer framework in places where you've seen it successful?
It's a little bit like roulette, quite frankly.
Is it the short straw, whoever grabs it?
Yeah, actually, sometimes I often feel sorry for the individual who's like, yeah, I've been lumped with like looking at voice of customer. What do I do? And I've had people get in touch with me who are like head of sales ops, people who are chief of staff, or where it really sits naturally is, it could be your customer success team or account management team. It even could be your UX team or your UX research team. Although UX research is they're looking at rather in-depth detail, and so sometimes it's not necessarily about the customer experience, it's about the platform. So it's sometimes you got to be careful. Or it could be an internal research team. I really do enjoy it where it's product teams. I think product teams are very, very valuable because they have that connective tissue and that interlinking and they're arteries around the business in terms of managing needs and building and designing them. And so product teams are a very natural place for it to live. Product marketing as well. And I go as far as saying that marketing organizations and also customer experience or customer success teams as well. But for me, it's always a case of I come in via one team at an entry point, and then it's quickly a case of I need them to recognize that they must get product and get product involved because you're gonna start calling the product team's baby ugly. You better have the data to back it, or you have them on board to want to be able to look under the hood of this. So I think there's definitely a number of different points, but I'd say product is a really good place. Customer experience or customer success or account management.
It's definitely really a reason that the product team should have direct contact with customers, in my opinion. They don't always, but I do think it underscores the reason of why that open and free flowing exchange can be really important. So they're getting unfiltered and unvarnished feedback. But once they've gotten that feedback, right? So we've got all this data, we've done the framework, it's all in a nice Excel or Google sheet. How do we actually ensure that voice of customer is influencing product decisions or potentially service changes? You and I have both seen instances where the roadmap is already set like 2 years in advance. And so great, we ask you for your feedback, but there's nowhere to put it. And we're not going to listen, and then you're going to get frustrated. How can a startup actually make sure that they're not only asking for that feedback, but they're acting on it, and they're acting on it in a time frame that the customer feels is acceptable?
Sure, great. Yeah, I mean, a perfect setup in terms of wanting to make sure that there's actual movement and you're actually doing stuff with it. The real starting point for me is to make sure that when you do these voice of customer sessions, and I really rely on workshops. Workshops are my favorite vehicle to do, and you can do them online, you can do them in person, and it's really the idea of like taking the product roadmapping process and apply that to your customer experience. And I know we're going to go into joint business planning and QBR stuff in episode 3, I think. But
you're so good at the teasers.
Well, might as well drop some hints now. So go back to about the question of how do you make sure that this information is used. That this links directly to the idea of make sure that you have your company mission, vision, goals, OKRs, etc., all mapped out. And I really think values is a really big part of it as well. And being able to take every bit of customer insight you receive and putting it through that process. Where does it sit within these company mission, vision, goals, etc.? And so from there, collecting that in, be able to sort them correctly and label them correctly. That gives you almost like a stack ranking or a weighting already. It definitely helps you have a vision in terms of what is below the line, what's parked. But when you do the customer conversations and you invite them to give feedback, you invite them to give thoughts and opinions on what's going to be useful for them. The critical setup for me is to walk into that session going, by the way, our job is to map out anywhere between 10 to 15 things that are important to you. And if you pre-survey them, you get an idea of what's going to come up. And if you have existing information, you get an idea of what sort of things are going to come up. And if you walk in with this list, and if you have multiple attendees from one company, the survey will kind of show you like how many times something was referenced. So you could use it as a force ranking gauge as well. So I walk into a scenario and say, listen, okay, based on what you said in the survey and based on all the existing customer insight we have for you, this is what it looks like in terms of prioritization. we're not going to do anything yet with this so far, besides culling at least a third. A third must go. It must go parked. And it's usually quite organic. I mean, usually people get a little bit freaked out. They're like, oh my God, like what do you mean we have to cull 5? We're going to cull 5 and we're going to put them in the parking lot because we collectively agree, based on everything else we can see in this list, these are just not important right now. And, you know, you cultivate a sense of like, you know, pride in saying, you know what, I actually think, you know, let's say I'm in the room and you and I are contributing to this process as attendees. You've got 5 things up there, I've got 5 things up there. I want to be able to look at mine and go, you know what, I've seen what Katrina's put on there. And actually, you know what, I think her 1, 3, and 5 are way more important than my 4 and 5. I want to get rid of my 4 and 5 because I think those are better bets. So you get this interpersonal, inter-team understanding of what's valuable and what's going to be useful, but having no shame in saying, you know what, my idea sucks. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. It's totally fine because you've seen other things that are more important and you can lend your weight to saying, actually, you know what? Say, hey, Jim over there, like, I know you think that's really important, but like, I've seen Katrina's thing here and I think that actually leapfrogs your thing. Do you mind if I park yours as well? And he might go, yeah, totally agree. So it's having this collective mindset of building things, but if you can bring everything back to mission, vision, values, objectives, OKRs, and every other acronym that I can put under the sun. But as a business, what are we doing and why? And why is it important? And if you can filter through that, you organically have a list. And then really honing on you know, let's say you have this original list of maybe 15 items or 10 items, should we say. Get to the mindset of, listen, we've got to drop 4. And then the 6 we have remaining, we've got to decide what are the top 3. The top 3 we'll try and get in the next 6 months. The bottom 3 we'll try and get done in a year. All right, who's ready to argue this?
I love that. I think it's also, we need to do an episode on radical prioritization, is what I'm thinking, which was not on our roadmap, but I'm going to put it on our roadmap.
Yeah.
But this has been such a interesting episode to really dig into the voice of the customer, the most important person to your business. And I think, you know, sometimes that we don't think about it that way, but in reality, you know, some people might think their investors are the most important, but in reality, your customer is truly the most important person to your business. That is why you have a business, and they are the people that you should be listening to. Thank you so much, Glenn, for coming to share your insights.
Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of Managed Chaos Podcast. You can find us anywhere that you stream your podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.
Outsourcing your US tech talent shouldn't be hard. With Pobble.io, we deliver high-quality teams on demand and provide huge cost savings to your business. Try it now at Pobble.io. Mention the amazing guys at Managed Chaos when you email us and get a free market data report. Email contact@Pobble.io.